is the ocean. And sometimes mystics refer to cosmic sea. And so just let me illustrate this for you in terms of what I mean. If the ocean represents the source consciousness, where we all come out of, and the individual waves represent our extensions temporarily from that consciousness, where we seem like we're individuals and we're separate. And if you look at the top of the waves, you could say, yes, this wave is separate from that wave. But you look at the base of the waves, they're all coming out of the same ocean, they're all connected. So
Yeah,
that's how I
brilliant.
think of it.
Insight and Awareness Spiritual Explorer. Soul intuitive, emotional, and spiritual mentor and award-winning author Lorraine Nylon.
Welcome, explorers, and thank you for joining our conversation today. Our guest is Dr. Howard Eisenberg, and he's a medical psychotherapist, educator, and the author of Dream It to Do It, The Science and Magic. I'm very excited to have you here today. But I want to kick off with the big question we ask all our guests because it is so much in your territory. What does humanity need to acknowledge and understand for us to evolve?
It's a very good question, and it's the actual purpose of why I've issued this book and why I'm doing these podcast interviews internationally. I was invited to present a lecture to the faculty of the University of Toronto a few weeks ago, and basically the lecture was about we're working, we're living, we're believing in the wrong model of reality, literally. I'll be more specific than that. Without trying to use too much jargon, in science, we have an expression called paradigms for models of how we understand things. And the model that most people believe in on the planet, and the scientists are largely, aligned with and endorsing, it's called the materialistic reductionist paradigm of reality, the materialistic reductionist paradigm of reality, which means in English, the belief that fundamentally external physical reality is the primary reality. And we have come about through random combinations of elements and chemicals over the years and are sort of a freak of evolution. And there is no other meaning to our lives or the universe that we're in. The problem with that belief is that it is only a belief, even though people think it's scientific. It's not. From what we now understand in physics, for example, in quantum mechanics, the notion that there are discrete physical particles that make up our reality is a misconception, and in part it's an illusion. So, for example, we look at any physical object, although it seems very solid to us and would feel solid if we, strike it, it's 99.9999% just empty space. So it's an illusion of solidity. Most of it is just emptiness. And then look at the actual, particles, so to speak, you find out they're not particles. They're actually waves. And you also find out that we cannot measure them or detect them unless there's some human observation at some point. In other words, when we observe it, we're observing it into form. So the notion again of a model of reality that material reality comes primary, we somehow have evolved from random combinations of chemicals over eons and developed as we are as living creatures and with sentience, with consciousness. That's just a speculation. That's an erroneous belief. The larger amount of proof is the opposite, that what comes first is primary, we call it the primacy of consciousness. So what comes first is awareness. In my chapter 2, for example, my title is The Only Thing You Can Absolutely Know. And I mean the only thing, and I mean absolutely know. For example, sometimes we think we're experiencing reality, and then we wake up and realize it was a dream, or we've had a few drinks or some other recreational drug, and again, confuse what is real. Um, the only thing we can't doubt is that we have awareness of being aware, whether it's in a dream, whether it's in a drug state. That's the only thing we can't doubt. Everything else, is more speculative. And so when we come from it from that point of view, that consciousness is primary, another aspect of the fundamental difference in this model of reality is the belief in the material reality is a belief in discrete, separate things, separate entities. If you look at the evidence for the other model, the primacy of consciousness, where consciousness comes first, and it sort of dreams up the physical world, then you have a very different understanding of how we figure into all of this, how we can relate to it. And because
And that's a hard
everything comes out of
concept.
this.
That's a really hard concept for people to understand. Like, when you're listening to it, it kind of,
I know.
like it throws you.
Yes,
So
it's very mind blowing, as I've said to many people. The book is mind blowing, but I can give you also some models. So just to continue along for a moment. So as part of this understanding of the deeper reality, that it all comes out of consciousness, we refer to this as the source, or what people might call God consciousness. And all of us ultimately coming out of that are actually connected, as is our external world, as in a dream. It's all coming from one source, so to speak. Even though
yeah,
in a dream we have other, perhaps people and creatures and geographical features, but it's just all coming from our mind, from our imagination. So the other thing, coming back to your original question, and I hope I'm not going too long in the answer, is that we need to understand not only that consciousness is primary, and that means again that the ultimate knowledge is within us, not outside. But secondly, we're all connected. We're connected to each other. We're connected to all sentient beings on this planet. We're connected even to inanimate matter, like the indigenous cultures have taught over many, many years. And in the resurgence with psychedelic drugs, it's something, yes, people are reporting. When they're in that state, they feel a sense of connection with everyone and everything.
yeah,
So if we had that sense of connection, Lorraine, we wouldn't be so competitive with each other. We wouldn't be so distrusting and even worse, hateful.
yeah.
We'd have a whole different world.
And
And so,
I try to simplify it for people and say, think of a beach. When you look at the beach, each grain of sand is making up that beach. And I always explain it too, that each grain of sand is significant and important, but we're all contributing, you know, to the ability of this beach to be something else. So, and the beach is allowing us to be that individual particle of it as well. So, and we can, and when, then I sort of flag off into, you can allow yourself to have all the dirt and the crud and all the rest of it over the top of you, and that you forget you're a grain of sand. You forget you're this part of this consciousness,
that's right.
or you can put in the work and the inner work, and just being aware is your starting point. Being
That's right.
willing to be aware
That's right.
and
It's
curious.
fundamental to open
Yeah,
up.
yeah, it's
Yes.
fundamental.
Remove,
We can't go anywhere without it.
remove, the filters. I mean, we're taught to believe certain things, even like in religion, for example. Do you
Yeah,
know in Christianity alone, there are over 45,000 denominations of Christianity in the world, just of that one religion.
yeah.
So again, we obviously have so many different religions, and part of the
Actually, it's
problem with
funny when
that.
people ask me, "Do you believe in God?" I ask them, first off, tell me which version you're thinking.
So some people, unfortunately become cynical about this, and some of the scientists did as well. Like there's always different variations of what the truth is. Probably there's nothing to it. But a much more intelligent way of looking at it was done by Aldous Huxley, and he looked at what's in common to all the major religions. What's the common
Yeah,
denominator,
yeah,
common base? And he called this the perennial philosophy. And he found there was much in common to all the major religions. They all believe, for example, that there's different levels of reality. This level, this physical level, is just one level of other levels of reality, and it's not the most important level. As the Bible says, it's one thing to be in this world, but not of this world.
yes,
And back to your model of, a conceptual model of the beach and the sands, the one I use is the ocean. And sometimes mystics refer to, cosmic sea. And so just let me illustrate this for you in terms of what I mean. If the ocean represents the source consciousness, where we all come out of, and the individual waves represent our extensions temporarily from that consciousness, where we seem like we're individuals and we're separate. And if you look at the top of the waves, you could say, yes, this wave is separate from that wave. But you look at the base of the waves, they're all coming out of the same ocean, they're all connected. So that's
yeah,
how I
brilliant.
think of it. And I think even in the Bible, I think Jesus explains this, where he says, I and the Father are one, but the Father is greater than I. As a child, I used to be confused by that. It seemed like, contradictory, but it's not. If you understand this model, it makes total
Yeah.
sense.
Well, I think the wave really does explain it, and then I think the problem with with us is that we're so used to looking at the surface of things, and we've been conditioned now to believe that this materialistic world that we've created is giving us definition, it's defining our worth, it's doing all these things that we should be doing from our sense of self. So that's created the separation. So and I looked on your I was curious to see what you meant by this. It's on your book description. Overcome the dark forces separating us from each other and nature. So, and what do you mean by the dark forces?
Well, I don't mean demonic forces when I say that way, but they're not benign. They're not altruistic. Um, they seek to exploit us for their own gain. So when people talk about, the 1%, for example, there are people of immense wealth who crave power,
Yeah,
and it's insatiable. They never have enough, or wealth. They never have enough, and they become sort of dehumanized in their detachment from humankind, what they do to people's lives, one way or another. Even with things like smartphone technology, I understand that Steve Jobs, who helped develop it and bring it into the world, he wouldn't allow his own children to use these types of devices. And I understand many of the Silicon Valley executives to this day will not let their young children use these devices because they know how distracting it is, how addictive they are.
yeah, yeah. It does actually. The more I've spent on my phone, I'm late to the party. The less my attention span has become.
Yes,
Like I've actually noticed that. So I put the phone away because it has become such a distraction, and it is actually altering my ability to be aware.
yes, it's good,
Yeah,
good, for you to have that perceptiveness. Unfortunately, many do not, and some of the advertising and social media, internet, we call it weaponized. It was intentionally designed to be addictive, to give what we call dopamine hits. So, when you do certain things, receive certain messages, it gives you kind of a reward chemical in your brain to get
yeah,
you more addicted, just like a rat in a maze.
yeah. I always get a little sort of uncomfortable giggle about Facebook users. It always sounds like a drug addiction.
Yeah.
The truth is always there. How do we get connected to our consciousness? What do you believe that we need to really understand to feel that personal connection?
So fundamentally, as the Vietnamese Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh said, the only way out is in. And one of the best ways to go in, especially for people who aren't familiar with it because they're so distracted or they haven't been taught such things, is meditation. And I try to provide instructions for people who aren't familiar with it or may have erroneous conceptions in meditation because there's a lot of misconceptions out there.
There
So
is.
that's the most fundamental way, I would say, as an individual to work with meditation. In my book, I also teach a more advanced technique for some people, lucid dreaming, sometimes called dream programming, to start being able to work at another level of reality by intention, to both go into that other level and come closer to the individual sense we have as I use the experience of Shakespeare, we're all players on a stage, temporarily. Um, Another way of thinking of ourselves, broadly speaking, in terms of like what is the nature of our existence, is that, and it sounds a little bizarre, but seriously, in a way, we're like skinwalkers having an earth walk
Right.
because consciousness, source, has a greater experience, more of an awareness through us. So some people wonder, for example, when you go back and look at in more religious terms about God as a creator, and wonder, but if God knows everything and has total control of everything, why would he want to create anything else? He already has like everything in perfection, so to speak. And my way of answering that, partly is philosophical, is that to have consciousness, to have awareness, you have to be aware of something. It has no meaning unless there's something to be aware of. So, in a weird way, Source, God consciousness, needs us for again, it's awkward to use words here.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well,
um,
it's all about the expansion. So
yes,
so
yes,
even for if we pull it back to ourselves, if you have, regardless
Mhm.
of what the experience is, if you have that experience, then you have an expanded awareness of what that experience is about, what the ramifications
Right.
are. Then we can go
Right.
101 different ways of what that awareness could be about. And that's what you're saying the collective source is doing via our
Yes.
lives. Yeah,
Exactly.
we're having an
And
experience, creating an awareness of what that experience and what those, so your feelings are actually an experience as well.
yeah, like as you may know, the Catholic priest and paleontologist said, Théo de Chardin, that we are not human beings having a spiritual experience. We're spiritual beings having a human experience. And, very, very different
Yeah,
conception.
very different.
So back to your original question, the easiest way and the fastest way for most people to discover the reality of this, as opposed to just intellectually understanding it, is through meditation. And partly, as I say, through lucid dreaming, so you learn to work with what I call the plasticity of reality. You can then shift reality. And then we start getting into the whole area potentially of manifestation when you start learning to work that way. But on another level that we could connect more to source, all of us in our everyday life, is to look more directly and openly in people's eyes when we're, in opportunities in everyday life where we can see people as opposed to on a screen, which is not quite the same thing at all. Um, the poets used to refer to the eyes as being the windows of the soul. And there's actually a very ancient tradition going back, to ancient India of what they call soul gazing. There is something to it. For example, when adults fall in love with each other, they spend a lot of time looking into each other's eyes. And they feel this wonderful sense of companionship, comfort, all good things. And what they're experiencing is a taste of source connecting with source. But then when we get distracted into things out there, and that people have some, that we don't have, and so on, we get into also ego. And then we start finding fault with each other and get distracted with our own, enterprises. And then we end up in conflict and we lose the love connection.
That
But
is
back to
true.
my point, it partly
Mm,
starts with the eyes, and it's
yeah.
powerful. Even young babies and infants, when they see strangers, often will seek the eyes of an adult. And when they see it, they'll smile, unless, the baby's been traumatized in some way. And adults who are open to it also usually smile. It feels good, that connection.
Yeah, there's a whole little conversation going
Yes.
on without a
So
word.
we need to come back, recognizing that. And of course, when we're losing these smartphones, we're getting further and further away from that. Uh, Not only, on a phone, of course, we have the auditory, and we have the visual potentially. But as you know, many people these days use their phones primarily communicating by texting. So they're losing so much wavelength, bandwidth, I should say, like of what communication they could be. And it amuses me sometimes when people are in animated text conversation back and forth, especially the younger people. They're using a phone. They could just talk to each other. And it's so much richer because then you get the modulation of voice, not just the words. So again, we're getting so distracted and we're missing so much
Actually, it was
of the
interesting.
essence.
There was a school teacher that was taking, a busload of kids on an excursion,
Mm-hmm.
and she said, years ago, years and years and years ago, she's a veteran teacher. She said it was noisy and loud, and like there was people, you were trying to keep them in their seats because they were running to talk to this one and running to talk to that one. She said now they just sit there and they're just looking in this phone. They don't do anything. So she actually made them. She went on the destination that
Mm-hmm.
way, and then she made them put their phones in their bags, in
Correct.
the, um, trunk of the bus, hidden away,
Mm-hmm.
and she said they were very slow, but once they started, she said all of a sudden there was that noise again, that they were talking. She said, but it took a while for them to come out of the shock of not having their phone, and I think
Well,
that's telling of
good
where
for
we're
her.
at.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, very telling.
And then you also have, from this distraction right now, there's so much divisiveness, go back to the dark forces that purposely stoke people to feel fear and anger so they control them by that. I won't name names, but there's certain people right now on the world stage who are masters at it. They
Yeah,
control
for
humans
sure.
like puppets.
Well, I was going to say we've become slave to our own materialistic need. Like we're looking at possessions as quality of life, and we're willing to go so far into debt that we become enslaved to our own debt, which makes us more like puppets for anyone that holds that debt.
Yeah.
So
And because we, spend so much of our energy on material things, both to obtain, manufacture, and then discard, uh, we're polluting our entire planet for ourselves and others. I think in some ways, sadly to say, we're just experiencing our second expulsion from the Garden of Eden because
yeah,
we
that's
cannot go back in our lifetimes. We are not going to see, the clear, clean skies and have clean water anywhere in this world.
yeah, that's sad, isn't it?
Very.
So yeah, I like how you put that. I've never heard that expression before, but yeah, we're the destructors. We're the
We,
oppressors of our own
we're about the
host.
most destructive of all the known species because, of course, there are species that are predators, which will, try to eat other species as their food, so to speak. Sometimes in the animal kingdom, there's rivalry for territory. But I think it's only humans who seem, some of them, to either not mind causing horrible harm to others, or at worst, sadistically enjoy it, enjoy their power over others. We have been so damaging to our fellow humans and our planet.
And do
But
you
this
see
again,
a
materialism and the
decline?
illusion of separation.
Yeah, for sure. Do you see a decline in how people are feeling about themselves? Like because we've got a higher rate of
Oh, absolutely.
yeah, mental health.
We have a very strong increase on the graph, on the curve of anxiety and depression. And among other things, it correlates strongly with the adoption of, in a popular way of social media. And, going back also to these portable smartphones, we can actually look at the correlation between the uptake and people using these technologies. Definitely. And when we just do general population surveys right now, I'm still doing medical psychotherapy myself. We've seen increasing incidents of depression, of suicidal ideation, and people just even experiencing like a brain fog where they just almost can't think clearly anymore. It's not rare. Even amongst my colleagues, healthcare colleagues, many of them are in fairly advanced states of burnout. So my patients now are physicians. It's
Yeah,
affecting
right.
everyone.
Yeah, actually, that makes sense. You know what I mean? Because we are pushing every system we've got to the limit. We're taking, but we're not giving much. So we're in this. Those systems have to fall because of that reason. There's no give and take.
That's right. It's not
Yeah,
sustainable. It's
it's
not
not
balanced.
sustainable. Yeah, true.
Whereas
So
the indigenous
when
people understood this concept, that you have
yeah,
to take care of things.
so why do you think people struggle to acknowledge this? Because once you're aware of it, it's very obvious. Like it's sort of out there to be seen. Why are we so head down and not looking?
Obviously, we're all conscious, but it doesn't mean we're, again, clear minded in our consciousness. So, taking an example, a contemporary one and a sad one, um, my southern neighbor, United States, being in Canada myself right now, used to be, until recently, a beacon of democracy for the entire world. It was also kind of a dreamland for, the American dream. You could go there with little means, and if you did hard work, educated yourself, you could have a very, good life, so to speak. But right now, it's on the verge of collapsing as a democratic country, period. Um, and coming back to this notion of people being conscious but not necessarily clear headed. So it's very interesting on one level, what's happening is that there's this fundamental disagreement on what the facts are of reality, in a sense, of whether certain people did certain things they weren't supposed to do or should have done certain things and so on. I'm not going to name names, I repeat. But my point is, we're talking about millions and millions of people who, on one level, have available to them the same information, the same facts, but they totally totally disagree with each other to the point, unfortunately, as you may know, in some cases of actually wanting to kill and murder the opposition. They
Mm.
consider them not just people that don't have the same picture, but the enemy. This is the United States,
Mm.
educated, cultured country. It's only one example. You know, I could look at Europe too, and how the UK pulled out of the European Union. And I could go on and on. I mean, there's a lot of
Well, yeah.
darkness out there.
Yeah. I wonder if sometimes we've got to take ourselves to the point of absolute stupidity before we actually go, all right, this isn't working.
Well, sadly, I think we're there. I mean,
We're
as I said,
there.
we no longer anywhere on this planet can enjoy, the beauty and healthful aspects of nature as we once did, and that won't be available in our lifetime, or
Yeah.
probably if we have children and grandchildren, then theirs. It's gone.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean, that it can't get a lot worse, because it is. I mean, with global climate change this last year alone, it's obviously to most people, it's not a theory, because, they dealt with unprecedented floods and the opposite droughts and forest fires. Um, Even for a while here, I'm in the Toronto area of Canada. We have these beautiful northern forests, and I always thought, lungs of the plant is a really good thing to have, and plus I love trees. But for a while in Toronto, because of forest fires from global warming up north, Toronto had the worst air quality index in the entire world.
Oh, really?
So again, things are happening that are so beyond the pale.
Yeah, yeah. 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 Well, bushfires are our problem too down here. You
But part of
know,
the problem, as things get worse, people develop more anxiety. Sometimes there's even a term now when it's dealing with the environment, eco anxiety, eco anxiety. And as they have more anxiety, it actually makes it more difficult for them to think clearly. And they're more likely to, fall into habits or be manipulated by peer pressure.
yeah, true. Yeah. Actually, that's one thing that people don't realize is when you are experiencing like a trauma, and
Hmm.
and if you feel insecure, if you feel like your survival is at risk, and that could be financial survival, it could be physical survival, it could be emotional survival, then all of a sudden you realize if you're in that sort of trauma state, you are actually walking around with a foggy brain. It's not connecting and
Right,
firing the way it's meant
right.
to. Yeah,
As I said, I think consciousness, from all the evidence that I'm aware of, which I present in my book, comes before what we call material reality. It's primary, just like the dreamer comes before the dream. Um, but that doesn't mean that we don't have the possibility of large scale transformation. And so now I'm trying to encourage people to be more reflective, because they're not encouraged by our culture to do that. It's the opposite.
yeah,
It's like pay attention, right, to
yeah.
what's out there. Um, uh, Trying to encourage people also to think more compassionately where others, because we're connected, right? So if you go back to, again, if you don't mind, the concept in the Bible of the golden rule, and other religions have, by the way, similar concepts as well. So basically, it means do unto others, treat others as you would have them treat you.
Mm,
Well, if you realize we're all fundamentally connected, then of course it makes total sense. It's not because you do it because you'll be punished, or it's just not ethical. It makes self sense. It's in your interest to have that
yeah.
way. But if
And
we
have
look at it
compassion
also,
for yourself as well, because
yes,
you have some people that are extremely compassionate for someone else, and they're not sharing that compassion for
yes,
themselves.
that's right. And
Yeah.
as you may know, one of the major Buddhist meditations is loving kindness for self. There's loving kindness for others, but also loving kindness for self. And yes, that
Mm.
is very important.
Yeah, massively important. And give yourself some grace too, I think, for people that are trying to work out. I teach courses on being self-reflective and the different
Hmm.
ways that you can do it and
Hmm.
why you want to do it.
Hmm.
And I always when people start unpacking their stuff, often their judgment rises. They go, "Oh," I was like,
Yes.
"Remember, give yourself some grace for naivety." So, but then once you're aware, take that responsibility for the awareness. And that's what I can see collectively we're not doing, is
Hmm.
we are aware, we are experiencing lots of different changes. We're watching the decline in our own emotional and mental health,
Hmm.
all the rest of it, we can get listed off, and we're not taking responsibility for it. We're not confronting the actual issues. We want to fight about topics, and pick one subject and argue about that, but we're
Mhm.
not actually looking at the bottom of the wave. We're only looking at the
Right.
top of it. Yeah.
Well, again, to quote the Bible, as you may know, without vision, the people perish. And that's the problem right now. So people can't think clearly. And the people we have in many cases are leaders, be it government leaders or corporate leaders, even sometimes religious leaders, do not have our best interests in mind and are not so wise in their own decisions.
Yeah, true.
But that's partly our fault.
Yeah, yeah, well, it is. We've all
So
we've
we
all
get
fell asleep at the wheel. That's
so we can
basically it.
reclaim that. Again, the only way out is come back in.
Mm. Yeah, that's right. So, and it's to be present and engaged, whereas we've become very isolated and insulated from our own actual reality.
That's
So,
right.
that's what I see is if we can shift some of that, which I think more people are. More people are going, "Oh, hang on, you know, why do I feel the way I feel?"
I
So
think there's some who definitely, Lorraine, are becoming more self-reflective,
yeah,
but I think a greater number are just, just tuning out. They're
yeah.
just confused and overwhelmed.
Well, there's also a lot of manipulation out there for those people that are searching that can fall into those traps as well.
Well, that's an interesting point, but it's a good one to raise actually for your audience. Um, Many other people who speak about some of the things I'm, referring to here, such as the primacy of consciousness and points of spirituality, and how we're too caught up, in external fantasy of a reality outside of us. Many of them, unfortunately, themselves are caught up in their own egos, so they really have a need emotionally also for themselves, so to speak, to build up a great following, to sell lots of books, to command, high fees for conference presentations and so on. And yet, sadly, some of these people are considered by the more general public to be some of the leaders and luminaries, and they're being fooled.
Mm.
Um, when I wrote my book, for me, it was a calling. I had to share for others what I'd learned. I self-published it. I used all my own funds, and I don't have that much. I'm near retirement right now at 77. Um, but I
I
felt I had to do
understand
it. I
this
felt called.
process.
Um, but for me, it's not at all about me. So, for example, I have an audiobook version of my book,
Yeah,
and I purposely hired a narrator other than myself, who's not my gender, female, not my country, England,
I did
uh,
notice that.
former BBC announcer, but
Yeah.
intentionally, because I don't want people to think, oh, it's him, like he's so enlightened, he knows all this stuff, and we have to listen to him. No, the teachings are out there now in the book and in various forms of the book, and it's not about me. I've discovered something. I'm trying to share it. I'm not the only one to discover it. I think what maybe is unique about my book and my work is I've connected the dots. I've proven it. It's not
Right.
a theory. I've
Yeah.
proven it.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And I think too is anyone that's on their spiritual path, or I call it an evolutionary path, to be honest with you.
I think of it that way too.
Yeah, yeah.
But it can
So
go
it's
both
like,
ways.
yeah, 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 definitely. So really what you're looking for is things that make you curious. If you're going to explore something, see if it makes you curious, see if it makes you question yourself. If it's telling you just to adopt, I should say, if it's telling you to adopt a belief and white knuckle yourself to it, that's not that's
Hmm.
not working.
Hmm.
Right? So if it's telling you who to be, it's not an evolutionary path because everyone is so unique and so individual that if it resonates with you and
Hmm.
inspires you, it gets you questioning, gets you challenging
Yes.
yourself, then you've got a path that will work for you.
Yes.
So no one's going to give you the prize. You actually, like I always say, wisdom is the prize of self-reflection, right? That's what you end up with. But you need to experience it. You need to be present in it. You need to confront those hidden recesses within yourself so that you can actually broaden your awareness. So that gives you a path to walk that will create, the buzzwords transformation, personal growth, whatever it is that you're looking for.
Right.
Most of us are just trying to understand ourselves and try and deal with the emotional baggage that keeps knocking us around. That's what spirituality is.
Well, I'm actually working on another book now on managing the ego, and really what some is referred to as emotional self-regulation as well. Because I think what's messing everything up is our emotions.
Yeah.
So whether it's fear or greed, which I think are the two main things driving us right now, with other things thrown in like hatred, unfortunately. But it's the emotional crap that's mixing everything up here. So I try to teach my patients and my students. I say, think through your feelings.
Mm-hmm.
Just because it comes up doesn't mean it's real or wise or logical. Think through it. You're aware of it, but think through it. It's part of like the Buddhist concept of non-attachment. It's not like be in denial and not be aware, but don't get caught up. But don't get caught up. Be able to navigate, keep your balance.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I always say when your denial starts to break, you start to learn. You know what I mean? Because once your denial starts to break and you're willing to, I call it the door opener,
Mm-hmm.
all of a sudden you see something different. You might see something that you don't like about yourself, but that's okay. It's an evolutionary process.
Yeah,
You can change it, you can. And it's through those experiences that you start to anchor to being part of your own consciousness. It's not something you're striving for, it's something within you that you
that's right.
can.
It's
Yeah.
there. You're just connecting with it. And another way of illustrating this other way of thinking of reality, this other model of reality, which may make it more digestible, comprehensible, to your listeners, is to know, which I describe in some detail in my book. Everything we have ever invented or discovered scientifically, and I mean everything,
Mhm.
came out of imagination. And
Mm.
in my book, I give examples of some of the most famous scientists who we think, were mathematical geniuses or had these very well-equipped, sophisticated laboratories, and that's how they developed, their discoveries and inventions. And that's so untrue. Even someone like Einstein, who was considered a mathematical genius rightly in many ways as an adult, but he began his exploration scientifically of reality in the universe when he was 16 by imagining himself riding a beam of light through the universe. Nikola Tesla, who invented almost all of our electrical infrastructure, did it all in his mind. He would visualize inventions in his mind. He would even operate them in his imagination like a simulation to see if they would work and what needed to be tweaked, all from his mind.
Yeah,
So
right.
we have a totally wrong sense in our educational system of
Yeah,
what has really produced knowledge that has been of any benefit.
yeah. Instead, we wanna push everyone to one way of thinking.
That's right. And my concern there is with AI now being unleashed, um, it's going to further it. I mean, you could argue right now that, we don't use enough hard based judgment in our affairs individually and on a larger scale too, for countries and the ecology of the planet. Um, but with AI, if humankind right now, the leaders, at least in humankind, and many of just the ordinary citizens, don't have the wisdom to use their heart about the correctness, the wisdom of various things, how can we expect AI to? I mean, with even more the extreme of
Mm,
cold hearted,
mm,
with no compassion,
yeah,
with no accommodation and flexibility, only what's
yeah,
programmed into it by the people at the top who have the power and own it.
yeah. Well, it's not, when you're talking or having a conversation, you're inspiring each other to express the truth of themselves, like, or their thoughts or what they're willing
Mm-hmm.
to explore. So there's this connective inspiration going on between. If you feel very comfortable with each other, it's different if you don't.
Yes,
With AI, it's working out how to manipulate you so it can serve you what it's telling you want.
that's
So,
right.
and we are taking little, cookie bites of things, and that's all we want to know. We're dumbing down. That's how
That's
I
right.
refer to it, dumbing down, and we're looking for what's going to give us a little hit or a little ego boost.
Yeah. I say, smarter phones, dumber people.
Yeah, it's a good
But unfortunately, it's partly true.
It's sad but true. Sad but true. Very interesting. It sounds like a very interesting book for our listeners to explore. So I think it's time for flip the book. So would you like to do an intuitive game and see where we end up?
I'm up to it. I'm
You're up
open.
to it? Okay, so there's 3 books to pick from. Would you like book 1, 2, or 3?
One.
1. So that is Breaking Free from the Chains of Silence. So at the back of the book, which is all we use for this exercise, because
Hmm.
it's a book for abuse victims,
Hmm.
is the true essences of our souls. So I've written about 24 of them. So this will be something that's really important to you, unique to you. So could you give me a number between 189 and 215?
191.
Okay, you've got 5 paragraphs to pick from. What would you like?
4.
Okay, so this comes under care. Care enables you to investigate the reality of your indifference against yourself, to realize your actions and reactions are resolvable emotions. To care is to explore beyond what is initially seen, believed, or opposed. That sums you up. Care enables you to patiently reveal truth to yourself at a pace you can comprehend. Care enables mindful exploration of your soul and truth. So if you didn't care, you wouldn't be in the exploration of it.
Very good. An interesting synchronicity because, as you remember, I was just saying a moment ago how I teach my patients to think through their feelings, and a different way you're expressing the wisdom of that.
Yeah. For our listeners, can you give us a tip on how to think through our emotions?
I made a reference just briefly, and I go into it more in the book about going with heart guidance, wisdom of the heart. Just briefly, that we now know medically, although it may not be common knowledge to the public, the heart is also a brain in our body. It
Mm.
has its own nervous system. It has its own memory system. It has more nerves that can control brain function in the head than the head brain can control the heart. The heart can
Um,
also secrete the love hormone, oxytocin. And the heart seems to be somewhat of an intuitive portal to source, to a deeper level. So back to your question, if we are, when we're evaluating certain decisions, should we do this, should we do that? Do I like this person? Do I not like this person? Do I trust them? Do I not trust them? If we would, and it's hard to put this in words simply, quickly especially, but if we try to shift our awareness in our body to the heart area, so the left chest area, and notice at times when we're considering pros and cons, if something is positive, there's more of a sense of, how should I say, a relaxation, looseness, and maybe a little bit of warmth in that area. But if it's the opposite, if it's something complicated or some we do not trust and have a good feeling about, it's a bit of a tension there, and it's a colder feeling. It's very subtle, but you can
mm,
learn to use that almost like a compass to help guide
yeah,
you for deeper truth.
yeah, I like that. Yeah, which is again, keep keep doing things that build up your awareness of yourself, even your, well, I call them energy sensations, because they're telling you things. They're educating you, they're informing you. So I want to thank you for being on the show. I've really enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you. So have I. Thank you, Lorraine, so much.